Agency owners, if you're like a lot of the clients we work with, you might be trying to figure out how to make new business more repeatable and really how to fit prospecting and the process of building net new relationships into your life if you're busy and if you're shuffling back and forth between working on proposals or talking to clients or dealing with running the agency. And the worst thing is there's this whole onslaught of different tactics that you can run. And with AI, it's absolutely overwhelming. If you go onto LinkedIn and you start listening to sales podcasts or reading articles, every single minute there's a new play you can run. And I want to create this video to help you simplify and get a lot more calm and confidence about how you're building the repeatable new business system. And there's really just a few variables to work with to decide how you are going to engage your market. The first one is really the who question, like who's going to be the one doing it, who's the face of the campaigns, who has the time and motivation to go out there, talk to people, shake hands if it's a conference, or shake virtual hands if it's a Zoom meeting. And for most agencies, even ones that are getting into a few dozen people or more, there might be months or years where that person has to be one of the owners. And really the answer to that problem is getting as much of the other stuff off of his or her plate so they can focus on prospecting. The second variable, which is really not talked about enough, is total addressable market, or TAM for short. What I've sort of tended to notice is that in the startup world, this is the first thing that people focus on. Silicon Valley, like love them or hate them, there's some very smart people there. And if you were going to start a startup and your goal is to make $100 million, there's a really simple equation that approach tends to focus on, right? And it's basically ARPU, which is a funny word, a funny acronym that means annualized revenue per user, times TAM, which is the number of customers or users, or in our case in B2B, that's usually accounts, times the percentage of the market that you think you can attain, and that number should be greater than or equal to $100 million. Now, I'm not saying you should want to go out and start a $100 million business, but you can still use this first principles thinking to figure out how you should approach your market. And one of the biggest issues is that all of those tactics and all those playbooks, like what I've found is that more than 90% of them are focused on big TAMs. All the automations, the AI, the crazy funnels, the signals somebody posted on social media about X, so I'm going to hit them up right now. Those tend to work very well for a large total addressable market where you might have 10, 20, 30, 40, 50,000 organizations. These are the agencies that are selling to personal injury attorneys or med spas or contractors. That stuff tends to work really well. But for us and for most of our clients, they are selling quote unquote up market. It's less important how big the company is and more about the volume of total companies in that market. So back to that original equation, which is annualized revenue per user. For you, this might be your first year value. Let's say it's like $50,000, $100,000, $200,000, whatever it is, times the percentage of the market that you can actually capture. Because your constraint is going to be the people to service these accounts, you can even just work backwards and say, we need this many net new accounts per year and we can comfortably service this number based on where we want to grow to. So for most agencies, that's an account a month and perhaps a lot less than that. And then you can kind of figure out, okay, like how many of these accounts do I actually need to engage? If we're working with a client that is going after large healthcare organizations, once you actually start drilling down to the right size companies in the right regions that are at the right stage of growth to be a fit for what we do, what you tend to find is that might be 1,000 accounts, it might be 500 accounts, it might be 200 accounts. And when you're looking at that, maybe there's 3, 5 people at those accounts that are actually going to be a good fit for you to talk to. And now all of a sudden, that's not that many people to hit up. So a lot of those playbooks that are going after mass market, you can just toss them aside. So really, like, what is the right way to engage those people? And there's not one way to do it. As one of my favorite marketing thinkers, Rory Sutherland, would say, the opposite of a good idea can be another good idea. But what we've seen work is doing outbound based on trust. So you're still being proactive, you're still playing the numbers game and getting the volume up to the right level, but your volume is just going to be different than the person with the large TAM. What we've seen work is a combination of referral-based outreach where you're mapping who knows who and bringing and using the connections you already have to get introduced to the right accounts. Tools like Sales Navigator can make this pretty straightforward. We do a lot of commonality based outreach where instead of going in cold, you're looking for prospects that have something meaningful on a personal or business level in common with you. Whether that's they're in the vicinity of an industry trade show that you're going to, they might be in your backyard, they might be from your hometown, they may have worked for one of your best clients and now they've gone on to another account. And also, a lot of what we do is thought leadership based outreach. There's this concept that I like to call the balance beam, right? Where if I asked you to walk across a balance beam on the floor, you would do it without thinking about it. You could probably do it in your sleep. But if I raise that balance beam 5 feet in the air, all of a sudden it becomes scary. You're wobbling. You might even slip or fall because of your nervousness. But the reality is, it's basically the same thing. It's still the same balance beam. That's what thought leadership really is. If you're having a qualification call with a prospect and you're talking about their problems and how you can help, and you're talking about your perspective and how your agency sees the world, well, if you throw on the recorder and record that, it's basically a podcast episode. And by the way, I'm not saying you should go start a podcast. If writing is more your speed and that's a better fit for the industry that you're reaching out to, well, guess what? That recorded conversation that you had building the relationship is easily a blog post or a white paper, especially if you're using AI tools and all the stuff that we have access to now. And the list goes on. If in person is more your speed and that's a better fit for your market, that's a breakfast invite or a workshop invite. So all of these things are the sorts of projects that the agency is often working on anyway. The problem is they're not using it to build new relationships, and they're often creating content that just doesn't even get looked at. So what I'm saying is reaching out to that CMO or that VP of marketing or whoever it is and saying, hey, we do design or we do performance marketing. Do you need that right now? Usually falls on deaf ears. Even if there is a need, they don't know, like, or trust you yet, and they're going to work with the agency that they know, like, and trust. So if you're thinking about it from a relationship building aspect, thought leadership outreach allows you to do two things. You get to come in and say, hey, we are creating an interview series with people like yourself, decision makers like yourself, on this specific problem over the course of the next month. Would you like to join? That's going to give you a game-changing response and conversion rate versus the alternatives. But also, if you're creating content anyway, you're fueling that process. So those are a few ways that you can approach your market based on a limited TAM. I'm not saying you have to do all of them, but if you pick one of those things and you think about your market visually as in, hey, everybody here can really fit in one high school gymnasium, it's going to be game changing in terms of how you do outreach. So hopefully this is helpful, and look forward to catching up before long. At Sales Schema, we help agencies literally build these systems. We sometimes just set up the data and get everything ready to go so they can launch them. We also have training and coaching programs that are much more flexible to move faster on this if you're ready to build a more repeatable and reliable new business system. Thanks so much.